So earlier this week, Pastor Marvin Winans went viral for appearing to shame a woman for contributing $1,200 when he asked for $2,000. The viral moment depicting him scorning a woman in front of the entire church community, even as her young son stood beside her, was really disappointing to witness. Now, the Bible is clear that each person should give as they have decided in their heart, not out of compulsion. Moreover, $1,200 is a lot of money, especially in this economy. And the moment struck me as wholly inappropriate and deeply disturbing. But it also caused me to wonder, again, what portion of a church service should be televised? Because not all of a church service, I think, is appropriate for everyone to see. You know, again, there are a few things about this that were pretty concerning. And let me just walk through those briefly, and then I'll come back to what I said a few moments ago about not all portions of church needing to be televised. The first thing that struck me is that Black people are generous. We consistently give to our friends, our family, our churches, and institutions that we care about. We give even when it hurts. And data has consistently shown that despite the racial wealth gap, Black people give a greater share of their wealth than do their counterparts. And so I say all of this to say that, if a Black person is going to church, um, if most people are going to church, they're probably going to give what they're able to give. In a 2020 article for the Washington Post, personal finance columnist Michelle Singletary noted, Black donors don't just give to the church. Their largesse generally falls into three categories: cornerstone, which is giving to higher education and the arts; kinship, which is donating to organizations serving the Black community; and sanctify, which is supporting Black churches. So the pressure campaign that we see at many churches, or at some churches, that's publicized on television feels off because we're talking about a demographic of people who tend to be very, very giving, especially if they have the means, right? Not to mention that $1,200, like I said a few moments ago, is a lot of money in this and in every economy. And it's like, who would dismiss a gift such as that? The other thing that was pretty sad to me is that the woman's son was standing right next to her. So she probably took him up wanting to demonstrate the importance of giving. And then when Pastor Winans appeared to scorn her, we don't know what his intentions are, but what it felt like to me and to a lot of people is that he was scorning her. And so her son was right there next to her. And I have to ask, like, what did it feel like to him to watch his pastor, we assume is his pastor, berate his mother in front of the entire congregation and the broader viewing audience? Now certainly Marvin Winans has spoken out, the woman has spoken out, but how's the child? Like, what did that feel like for him? And also, what message does it send to him, not only about church, but about giving and about the role of a pastor and how pastors should interact with parishioners? I think the final point is the point that I made at the beginning is, why was the offering broadcast in the first place? Like, what was the intention of broadcasting the entire service, assuming that's what happened? I always thought that when churches broadcast their service, the intention was to share the gospel with the world, to share the gospel with people, who are non-believers. And if this is the intention, if this is the purpose, the offering really doesn't need to be broadcast. I even wonder if the altar call should be broadcast. These are deeply personal moments, and I just don't think that these things need to be broadcast. I mean, it is for people who are in the congregation at that point. So I've said before in another video that I think that when people think about church, there are two parts of church services that are very stressful: the offering and the altar call. If you grew up in a church that was really heavy-handed or dogmatic, you could have a lot of fear around the altar call. I remember my own experience. Our churches were pretty heavy-handed, the churches that my mother took us to. And as a young woman, I never thought that I was saved because I was aware of my imperfections, and I had so many fears based on what I observed. So I would always question, am I saved? And sometimes I felt like when there was an altar call, okay, maybe I should go up again, even though, I had given my heart to God and I was doing the best that I could, but I still felt such immense pressure and a degree of shame. And so I think for a lot of people, the altar call can be stressful, especially depending on how it's administered. The other part of a church service that can be very stressful is the offering. Again, if you've been to churches and it felt like a pressure campaign, the offering is going to evoke some level of anxiety. I mean, think about how you feel when you go to a store and you go to a store and there's a salesperson who's following you around. They're asking you what you want, they're making recommendations. Most people don't like that. I know I hate it. And so I don't want to feel that kind of pressure at church either, where, I've already decided what I'm going to give, or maybe I feel led to give a certain thing. And the person who's collecting the offering, they want more. So since we know that these two portions of a church service can be very stressful, I think that we have a responsibility, pastors have a responsibility, church leadership has a responsibility, in my opinion, to carefully steward these carefully steward these things. Again, Pastor Marvin Winans has spoken out, the woman has spoken out, and regardless of the explanation that he provided, people are going to watch that video and they're going to draw their own conclusions. Not all of their conclusions will be in favor of the church. Now, we don't know Marvin Winans, at least I don't know him, I don't know his intentions, but I think that if the church could avoid these kinds of things, if they were more careful in how they raised offerings, more selective in what they televised, and also more careful in how they shepherded God's people. I don't want to speak about, him as a pastor because I don't know him. I just know that we see a lot of videos from pastors, and it seems like there's a very heavy-handed approach with God's people. And at the end of the day, God is the ultimate shepherd. And if people are entrusted to you, I feel like we have a great responsibility in how we manage that. The final thing that I'll say is that, I said a few moments ago that the church should be selective on what it televises. Now, the other thing that can happen is if parishioners are in a service and if they feel that they are not, if they feel that something is not right, something is not appropriate, they may record the service themselves and they may put it out for others to see. So that also happens. So I just want to add that caveat. If you like this content, please be sure to subscribe. You can also leave a positive comment. But even if you don't choose to do those, I just want to say thank you for listening. And until the next time.